In this video, I'm going to be taking you through the production to post-production workflow using Calibrite's ColorChecker, Passport Video 2, and DaVinci Resolve, so let's go. Before I jump into the specific workflows for both production and post-production using Calibrite's ColorChecker Passport Video 2, and I'll refer to it as the Passport Video 2 going forward, I just want to give you a quick overview of what this product is and why we're using it on our projects. And this really is a precision calibration tool. It is something that is manufactured in a very specific way so that whether you're shooting with one camera, multiple cameras, whether those cameras have the same sensor or multiple sensors, you're shooting interiors, exteriors, the same lighting, or you have very mixed lighting. We want to be able to, in all of those various situations, balance and match exposure, contrast, and color. And if we have that baseline, then we can move forward creatively in post-production to create the look and feel that we want for our projects. So what I want to do is just go through some of the different features and what each of these four targets are. So let's do that right now. Let's start with the ones which are the core focus for this video, which have to do with video production. And I do want to reiterate that these are precision calibration tools. The process to manufacture these has been and continues to be extremely precise. So caring for these is very important. Of course, we have this small durable case here, which can be adjusted, which is why you have these hinges which are so strong so that it stays where it needs to be. But caring for these patches or chips is also extremely important. Try not to put your fingers on them. Those oils can affect them. We want to protect them from the elements. If you do so, you'll get years out of this tool. So over here, what we have on the left-hand side is our first target, which is called the grayscale target. So we have white, we have gray. This is a 40% IRE gray, and we have black. And you will notice as I move the target that there is some shininess to that black, and that is for a specific reason. What we want to do is when we capture this, we want to make sure that we get the darkest, truest black that we can. And so that is why it is designed that way. And when we get into the production workflow, we'll talk about that some more. These three steps are allowing us to take this into post-production and work with our exposure levels. Now over here, we have our video color target, and this one is essential in terms of being able to create a baseline when it comes to not only contrast and exposure, but more specifically color. And you'll see here that we have these different columns and rows of chips or patches. And the first one here has to do with our chromatic color patches or chips. And these are designed for tools that we use in post-production, most specifically vector scopes. And we'll talk about how we're going to use those in post-production to get to that color baseline. The next chips that we have here in the second column are specific to skin tones. So when we're aligning and capturing different skin tones, we want to make sure that we have a reference for that. The next 6 balance patches are specific to gray balance. So they expand upon these 3 that we have here in terms of gray balance. And then the last set of 6 chips or patches are specific to highlights and shadows. So combined, when we capture both of these targets in production, it allows us to get to that baseline where we're getting consistent exposure, contrast, and color. Okay, let's move on to the other targets that we have in the Passport Video 2. And these two, and you can see them again here on my right, are primarily used for stills photography applications. This one right here is the white balance target. And what's great about this is it is spectrally flat or neutral. It is reflecting all of the light that's hitting it. It's not absorbing any of it. So when you're white balancing your cameras, this is a great tool to have. And then lastly, we have the ColorChecker Classic. This is an industry standard that's been around for decades. These 24 patches or chips are used by still photographers all of the time to create custom camera profiles. And the fact that we now have all four of these targets in one precise calibration tool is fantastic. What I want to do now is I want to focus on these two targets for the rest of this video, the ColorChecker Video Grayscale target and the ColorChecker Video Color target, and how we're going to use these in production and post. Now it's time to jump into the production workflow using Calibrite's ColorChecker Passport Video 2. And I want to just start by saying that as a best practice, what we like to do is do this as a first step. And anytime the environment or the lighting changes, we're also going to roll on these targets. Now, this target right here, which I've called out as 40 IRE gray, is fantastic when you're shooting in RAW and in log. It's a great exposure tool when you're taking and capturing that when you get to post. If you want to capture something that's a more traditional neutral, middle, or 18% gray, Calibrite does have solutions. I have this little Gray Balance Mini right here. This is a traditional neutral, middle, 18% gray in terms of reflectance. They also make this, I'm just going to show you this, and we roll on this, especially when we're in interior locations and we have a waveform monitor up for exposure tools on this one. This is the ColorChecker Gray Balance target. And then over here is really a larger version. This is the ColorChecker Video. So again, when we're in more controlled environments and we're in studio-based locations, we very oftentimes capture those larger targets, but there is not a time that we're not taking the Passport Video 2 with us and capturing this on our productions. It's so handy, gives us all of the information that we really need in our productions. All right, so the key to the castle here. We want to make sure that if you are in a production environment that has multiple cameras, that you're going to capture this target with all of the cameras that are rolling. The next thing is to make sure that with that super black or that deep black chip or patch on both sides here for the gray balance target and the color target, that it is reading as a true black. So as I rotate the target here, you will see that sometimes light is hitting that. If we capture it like that, then the problem is that when we bring it into post-production, that we're not going to get a true deep black. So you just need to make sure that when you are adjusting it, that it is clean. I also like to make sure that when we're rolling on it, that we do a direct to camera type of situation. And we also will rotate it slightly towards the key light so that we have something as a reference that way, because we will get slightly different exposure values when it comes to doing that. And that's really all you have to do, is you just have to capture it that way. Now, in this particular studio environment, it's extremely controlled. My cameras are white balanced to match each other. My lighting is balanced to match this particular look and feel and environment. So I have a great starting point here. We are capturing all of our footage with a log profile and a wide color gamut, which gives us lots of options in post-production. Do you have to do that? No, even if you're shooting in, let's say, a baked-in look or a Rec 709 capture, you still want to capture these charts. It is the first line of defense in terms of getting what you want out of your footage for your productions. But let's just say that in this environment, we set up the cameras, our lighting was a certain way, but for some reason, somebody forgot to change the white balance on our cameras. So what I'm going to do is dip to black right now. I'm going to go ahead and change the white balance on the cameras, which are set right now to basically match the lighting that we have. And then we'll roll on this and we will look at it in the post-production section. All right, this doesn't look right. And why doesn't it look right? Well, our lighting is still daylight balanced, but our two cameras are set to 3200 Kelvin. So we are way off in terms of that. And that's where the Calibrite ColorChecker Passport Video 2 comes into play. If we capture these two targets properly in production, it should be very easy to get from this to this. And now it's time to jump into the post portion of this video and take you through that process. Okay, I'll be showing you a couple of different ways to use the Calibrite ColorChecker Passport Video 2 in DaVinci Resolve and touching on the strengths and weaknesses of each. I do want to call out, like any nonlinear editing program, Resolve has a wide variety of tools and different ways to achieve the effect you're looking for, each with its own advantages and disadvantages. As with any project before you start, you're going to want to make sure that your DaVinci Resolve project and color management settings are set up in a way that will work best for you based on your source media and your delivery requirements. Resolve has a lot of options, and understanding and setting these up correctly will help you avoid issues down the line. Please refer to Resolve's documentation for best practices related to this. For the first part of today's demo, we're going to work with a clip that was recorded in Rec 709. We're going to use the tools in DaVinci Resolve and the information captured from the Passport Video 2 to set up a strong and accurate baseline for our project's color, contrast, and exposure. All right, we're going to begin by making sure that our whites are actually white using the grayscale target from the Passport Video 2. You'll want to make sure that you have a frame selected where you can see all of the targets without any reflections or glare in the deep black target. Choose the window palette from the center palette panel, then turn on the polygon controls and adjust the power window mask so that it fully encompasses the grayscale target. This allows us to use the RGB parade and very quickly and easily verify that white is white and make any adjustments that might be necessary. From the left-hand palette panel, make sure you have the color wheels page selected. From here, we want to set our color channels for that portion of the target to match in the RGB parade. The easiest way to do this is choose the white balance tool from the left-hand side, click on the white target, and Resolve will automatically set the tint and temperature to even this out. The white balance tool is pretty reliable, as we can see by double-checking both the parade, where our color channels are even in the whites, but also by using the qualifier tool to check our color values throughout the white target. You can see that our red, green, and blue values are virtually identical, with only minute fluctuations. Okay, for a different approach, let's undo and see how we can achieve this adjustment manually so you have the most control and so you can really hone in on a more accurate result. We can manually adjust the temperature and tint settings until the red, green, and blue channels are all in line with each other. Once these adjustments have been made, we can check this with the qualifier tool to make sure that our white patch on the Passport Video 2 is actually white. The next thing we're going to do is set our exposure and contrast. Let's switch over to our waveform scope and adjust our lift, black level, gamma, midtone level, and gain, white level in our source footage. We're going to want our gain or white level to sit around 896 based on our white patch from the Passport Video 2, our lift or black level a little bit above 0, and our gain or midtone level somewhere between 384 and 512, depending on your source footage. There will be some degree of push and pull, so you'll need to go back and forth a bit to dial this in. Once you have that dialed in, disable your mask and check for any additional exposure and contrast adjustments you might want to make. In this setup, we've got a couple of deep shadows in our frame where we're losing detail, and our window is providing additional light on our subject and background. In this case, even though our placement is optimal, the white on the Passport Video 2 is not the brightest part of the frame, and the deep black is not the darkest. So for this shot, we want to adjust our black level so it sits just above 0, and our white level so it sits just below 1023. Doing this is also going to shift our gamma or midtone level a bit, so we'll need to dial that back in too. Every setup and every environment is different, with unique factors impacting every part of our frame. So we always want to prioritize preserving the integrity of the image when we are creating our baseline. Sometimes this requires some creative judgment. In this shot, for instance, where the windows in the back are our brightest point, they're not so bright that we want to take them all the way up to 1023. The Passport Video 2 is an invaluable tool to help us get us where we need to be, but ultimately you'll need to account for the realities of the whole image you are working with. We're now going to move over to the vector scope to set our saturation and color levels. Adjusting our power window mask again, we're going to move it over to the chromatic color patches / chips on the Passport Video 2. On the Passport Video 2, the chromatic color chips are all designed to correspond to a 50% saturation for each of our colors: red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. On the vector scope, we'll see this spiderweb pattern in the center. Each of these arms represents one of the colors, and these outer boxes represent full saturation. Typically on a vector scope, we'd want these arms to land halfway between the center and each outer box, since the patches / chips are at 50% saturation, but Resolve has a setting to make this a little easier and more precise. If we open our vector scope settings, we'll see that we have an option for a 2x zoom. Since these outer squares normally represent 100% saturation, turning on the Show 2x Zoom setting allows us to see our 50% saturation patches in the outer boxes, which allows us to align everything more easily. You're also going to want to make sure you bring the brightness up to the maximum for this scope, which will help you see the display considerably better. Now choose the Curves palette from the center palette panel and switch over to the Hue versus Saturation curve. First, click to select all 6 of these buttons at the bottom: red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. Each of these buttons places a point on the Hue versus Saturation curve at precisely the right place to represent the 6 colors in the chromatic color chips portion of our Passport Video 2 target, which is also the same colors represented by the boxes in our vector scope. The Hue versus Saturation curve allows us to target a specific color, and it allows us to adjust the saturation of each color independently of the other colors, rather than doing a global adjustment. So, with each of these points, adjust them so that the point at the end of each arm sits inside the outer boxes in the vector scope. One of the nice things about Resolve is that while you can manually adjust the points in the curve, you can also adjust the saturation with this value box. The advantage of doing it this way is that you can be sure you're not accidentally moving your control point slightly to the left or right as you're working, which can shift the color value you're working with. You have to use some best judgment here because different cameras can capture different colors in slightly varying degrees of hue and saturation. The colors you have to adjust at this point and the degree to which you have to adjust them can vary depending on the camera used and how it is set up to record. Once you have those arms set roughly to the distance of the squares, we can move to the Hue versus Hue curve. These controls allow us to take these same isolated colors and make adjustments to the color itself as opposed to the saturation of those colors. Here we can see that some of the arms aren't lined up properly. The Hue versus Hue curve allows us to fix this. You can see here that by making even slight adjustments to the magenta point, we can cause wild adjustments to the magenta arm, so the changes we make in this curve are almost always going to be minor. This is a situation where you'll want to go back and forth between the Hue versus Saturation and the Hue versus Hue curves to make sure you're dialing everything in to the right place. Once those are set, we can turn off our power window and see that our image looks properly adjusted in terms of exposure, contrast, and color. To double check our skin tones in our footage, we can move our power window over to the skin tone patches on the Passport Video 2 and verify that they're aligned with the skin tones line on our vector scope. Our calibration has gotten us very close, but if we want to play with it a bit more, we can move over to our color slice tool and enable our skin tone mask. This will solo our skin tones. From here, we can play with our skin tone center to make sure we've got both the skin tone patches from the Passport Video 2 and our subject matter included. We can then make slight hue adjustments in order to get even better alignment with our skin tone line. At this point, you've got your baseline set for color, contrast, and exposure, and you can start thinking about all the things you'd like to do in your final color grade. That's one way to use the Passport Video 2 manually, but there's another workflow inside of DaVinci Resolve that we should touch on, and that's the automatic color match feature. Let's start over from scratch with our footage. This allows us to place a specially designed grid over our Passport Video 2 target, and it allows Resolve to basically automate this entire process for us. The first step is to choose the color match panel from the left-hand side of the palette panel. This will give you access to the color grading tools we will need. Then, under the color match tool, choose the target we are using. In this case, we're going to select the X-Rite ColorChecker Passport Video. This is the correct chart to choose as this X-Rite target is now a Calibrite branded product. DaVinci Resolve hasn't been updated yet to show the Calibrite branded version of this product, at least by the time this video was made, but may have been by the time you're watching this video. Once the correct target has been selected, choose the color chart qualifier under the on-screen control menu pop-up. You'll then notice a grid-like overlay that appears over your video. You'll also notice that it has a layout that is reminiscent of the Passport Video 2 target. Resize the color chart overlay so that each of the sampling boxes line up with their respective patches/chips on your target. Back under the Color Match tool, press Match. Utilizing the information collected by the sampling boxes in the color chart overlay, Resolve adjusts the image. As you can see, the automatic results aren't quite as accurate as what we can achieve manually. While this is less work and can be adjusted afterwards to help get your footage into a better place, the results we can get manually are generally more accurate and effective for your project. Now that we've gone through working with a pretty straightforward Rec. 709 shot, let's take a quick look at something a bit more challenging, a shot recorded with an incorrect white balance. In this case, the camera was set to 3200 Kelvin, with daylight balance lights being used. This shot was also recorded in Canon Log 2 and Cinema Gamut. You can see here that when Resolve has translated this footage, everything has a blue cast. Let's open up our RGB parade and set our white balance. In this case, while the RGB values match for our gain, white level, the RGB values for our gamma, midtone level, and lift, black level, still don't match. To fix this, we can select our primary color bars controls, which allows us to dial in the red, green, and blue channels separately. There will be a lot of push and pull, but a little persistence gets us to a spot where they're all even. Next up, let's go into our waveform monitor and make our exposure and contrast adjustments. Then, we'll disable our mask to make adjustments for the surrounding area of the scene to make sure we're not losing detail. Our last adjustments are to saturation and color. Let's pull up our vector scope and set our points in the hue versus saturation curve and the hue versus hue curve. When we're done, we have a neutral image completely free of the blue cast created by our incorrect white balance setting. So there you have it. That is an overview of the production to post-production workflow using Calibrite's ColorChecker Passport Video 2 with DaVinci Resolve. The goal, as always, is education, so I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching.